Cabinda in oil boom towards self-determination. So, what's Cabinda? Cabinda is a small piece of land in Central Africa and was first colonized by the Portuguese. Its boundaries were set by European powers at the 1884 Berlin Conference, and it's now an exclave in province of Angola. But many problems occurred between Angola and Cabinda. Most of them are due to the huge strategic oil reserves situated in Cabinda. As an exclave and an oil producer, Cabinda saw some of its inhabitants creating the FLEC, the Front for the Liberation of the Enclave of Cabinda. With the help of Old Zaire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, they are the ones deeply seeking for independence. Even though a major part of Cabindan population seeks the self-determination of the province, Angolan government fight to maintain the control on it, which conceived civil wars and instability. Through all the components of the geopolitical analysis, and according to the oil boom, is Cabinda really going through self-determination? What are the stakes for Cabinda's independence according to its characteristics? And will the oil boom and the international market implanted in the Cabinda prevent this independence from occurring? To better understand this problematic and how this will of independence has been developed through the years, let's see a little summary of Cabinda's most important historical facts. In the 15th century, Portugal began to develop the slave trade with Western Africa with trading posts that will then become cities. In 1883, Portuguese colonists occupied Angola and so Cabinda, and the current frontiers of the country were set in 1884 at the Berlin Conference by European powers. It was said that Cabinda was a free state, but soon later, Angola asked to have Cabinda as a province and it was accepted. The oil exploitation of the country, especially in the region of Cabinda, began in the 1950s. A will of independence was revealed with the creation of the FLEC, and at the time a global will of Angola to become an independent country. The FNLA, National Front for the Liberation of Angola, and UNITA, National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, were established. These politic groups engaged a campaign of violence against the colonial government. In 1975, and after a civil war and a lot of conflicts, Portuguese decided to leave the country without formally handing over control to any succeeding government. The MPLA, People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, took the head of the country, and serious negotiations with the FLEC began, without being considered by the MPLA during politic decisions. Zaire, that welcomed a lot of Angola's refugees and other border countries, expressed their support to the exclave. In 1992's presidential elections, MPLA government appeared ready to negotiate a separate status for Cabinda. Nothing happened except violence. A big civil war started in Cabinda with a strong presence of FAA, Angolan Armed Forces. FLEC, from that moment, never accepted MPLA's propositions of peace agreement. But does the Cabinda really have the power and capacities to be independent, given it has been controlled by the Portuguese and Angolan government for a long time now? We'll analyze this province on the political, geographical, demographic, and economic area in order to answer this question. First of all, the demography of the province is very similar to the Angolan one. The population is about 700,000 inhabitants. During the last decades, as a majority of countries, there is a growth of population, and so a larger distribution of wealth. The gender balance is quite equilibrated, and the life expectancy is quite weak, which shows the lack of development of the province, just like Angola. What's more, the density of the country is medium, so that isn't an obstacle for Cabindan prosperity. An explanation can be that there are a lot of migrants that run away Angola and so Cabinda because of the global situation, whether it is political or economic, And from another side, there is a big repression by Angolan government to clandestine immigrants, especially from Myanmar's frontiers. The main reason is a geographic situation and resources that seem to promise a good rate of employment. A lot of people wanted to leave this enclave that knows a lot of instability, and many diasporas have been created around the world, and particularly in Europe. During the conflict with MPLA, they clearly took part to defend FLEC independence and supported Congolese people and their treatment on Cabinda's territory by Angola's army. A lot of information was driven on social networks all around the world about those violences, but Angola's government always refuted it. Because of civil wars, conditions and frameworks in the country aren't good, because Angola led the exclave against its interests. The education is also a big problem in Cabinda. Around 30,000 pupils are studying under poor conditions in improper places as chapels, for example, and have bad results at school. One of the explanations can be that before there were social cultural differences between the Portuguese education program and pupils. In terms of military education, there is a high level of patriotism globally in Angola, but instilled in Cabinda as a national education. Traditions and habits are different through the country. There are roughly 100 ethnic groups in Angola and also inside of the exclave. The major part of the population of Cabinda belongs to the Bakongo tribe, but we can also find 300,000 Bakongos in North Angola. The Mayombe ethnic group lives in the mountain forest of eastern Cabinda and is a small minority in the province, but is active and created an alliance to represent them, and they have an impact on Cabinda's decisions. The official language, as historic, is Portuguese, but isn't really practiced. All the Cabindan population speaks Kikongo or dialect closely similar. Religion traditions are very linked to its colonial history. In Cabinda and in Angola, the major religion is a Roman Catholicism. For example, the city of Cabinda is the seat of a Catholic diocese. But habits are very close to border countries, language, religion, ethnic groups, which shows that Cabinda is more attached to RDC or Congo than to Angola. This proximity can be explained, of course, because of the geographic position of Cabinda. Congo and Cabinda are sharing their traditions. Geographical characteristics and especially resources of Cabinda are the most important reason of its power of negotiation, but also explain the attraction and covetousness of Angola in implementation of multinational groups. Cabinda is in West Central Africa, bordering the South Atlantic Ocean, and isn't geographically connected with the rest of Angola's territory. There are 4 municipalities, and Cabinda is the biggest city of the region, with a strategic position next to the sea with an active port and an airport, and also exploit the sea with fishing activity. With its large tropical forest and tropical climate, Cabinda produces many natural resources with agriculture, hardwoods, coffee, cocoa, palm oil. Even though the country is very poor, they don't suffer of starvation or malnutrition. But the product for which Cabinda is the best known is its oil. What were the resources of Cabinda? If it was separated from Angola, would Cabinda be deprived of indispensable elements within its life? Well-known resources of the ground and underground of Angola on its immense territory are extremely important. Resources of Cabinda, as well in agriculture, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, bananas, food crops, in fishing and breeding, as in underground resources, oil, which is already partly exploited by big companies, diamonds, like in Angola, phosphates, manganese, etc., are not vital for Angola's economy and could assure an independent international identity to Cabinda. Cabinda and Angola are separated with a 60-kilometer strip of DRC land. Inevitably, this separation has consequences. The strip, that is to be crossed consistently, has a capital importance, as well as capital strategic and economic interests for the DRC. Indeed, the strip is the only access to the sea for the DRC, as well as its only access to the Congo River, which are the most essential places for its trade. There are lots of tensions when crossings are made through the strip, and that's why the DRC is favorable for Cabinda's independence. It will ease the atmosphere. Even though Cabinda attracts lots of multinational and must thrive, this isn't the case. Actually, oil production in Cabinda provides a vast majority of Angola's foreign earnings. Yet Cabinda received less than 1% of the oil revenue and remains underdeveloped, and the people remain poor. Can the country become financially and economically independent? We thought that they have the natural resources, but they are not the actors that exploit it. On what is the economy based? Most Angolan oil is in Cabinda, and it represents 0.2 to 1% of the province world production. Today, the political figures of Angola want to transform Cabinda into a regional logistical platform. The Transport Minister Augusto Thomas said, "We want Cabinda to have infrastructures that bring about competitive advantages in relation to the neighboring countries and help the province live better and in territorial, economic, and social cohesion, national unity, and employment." Angola is investing a lot in the province with the deep waters Caio port, the rehabilitation of the Maria Mambo Cafe airport, the logistical platforms of Masabi and Yema, and so on. Does the Cabinda have the resources to continue to invest in oil farming? On a purely economic description of the situation, the currency of Angola, the kwanza, has inflated by more than 27% in the last 12 months. Today, one kwanza equals 261 euros. But it doesn't stop external companies to come in Cabinda. Cabinda is a site of some of the biggest investments in oil made by US companies abroad. Chevron was in Cabinda for its beginning of oil production and is still in Cabinda to invest in projects such as the Deepwater Angola Liquefied Natural Gas project, as well known as ALNG project, or even for the offshore Mafumeira project. Halliburton is also acting in Cabinda and is part of the Move Out project, which is meant to relocate firms providing services to oil operation from Cabinda's Chevron Malango field. There are other companies in the province, such as Eni and Sonangol. But not only the US are well implemented in Cabinda, China is in the game too. In fact, China granted a line of credit up to $600 million to Cabinda to finance the construction of the Caio port, and the construction is to be made by a Chinese company. Moreover, a Chinese company has been hired by the Angolan government for a project of electrification and domestic connections in Cabinda. What if Cabinda becomes self-determined? Economically, this is a very complex question, because even if there is a huge amount of resources to exploit, it costs money to exploit them without the help of countries like China or investments from the Angolan government. Cabinda wouldn't know where to start. But Cabinda is often called an African Kuwait, and this is for a good reason. So far, they only perceive 1% from the government about the oil exploitation on their territory. If they perceived all of the benefits, it would be a game changer. To conclude, we must say that the people of Cabinda have a right to profit from their own natural resources and to determine their own destiny. As a result, the Cabindan people should, like the East Timorese and the Quebecois, have the opportunity to determine whether to remain a part of Angola or become a separate nation. For this referendum to become reality, however, the United Nations must take action. The United Nations must take an active role in this referendum to ensure that the vote is an accurate expression of the will of the Cabindan people. The Cabindan people have a right to self-determination, and at present that right is overshadowed by Angola's financial gain. For the United Nations to remain relevant in the 21st century, it must fulfill its mission by guaranteeing choices to oppressed people struggling for freedom against economically superior oppressors.